Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? My name is Sami. I'm the CEO of CertiCraft. We are a company on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. Our primary way that we do this today is through a compliance platform, also called CertiCraft, that makes the ridiculously tedious compliance requirements way, way simpler. This is a CertiCraft. This is episode 24, and it's actually our very last episode of season 1. Don't you worry, there's going to be a season 2, and we'll talk about that at the end. And season 2 is going to be a bit different. It's going to change the format of what we've been doing. And yeah, if you are here at the end, you'll get to hear how it's going to be different. And the CertiCraft's focus is on discussing the legal craft cannabis industry. Season 1 has focused on what's going well, what's not going well, what do we need to change to address the problems that exist today. And it felt like a very appropriate way to cap off this season with that focus, with a panel by people who've chosen to revoke their licenses because of all the problems and the issues that have been going on in this industry. I'll introduce our guests in a bit. I first want to do a land acknowledgement and take care of some housekeeping items, and then I'll introduce Samantha and Chris. So yeah, I live in Nelson, BC, and Nelson, BC exists on the unceded ancestral territories of the Sinixt people, and through intermarriage, the Tanaha people. And in this region of Canada, there was some pretty serious genocide that took place. There used to be thousands of Sinixt people here just 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Today, there's less than 10. And that was almost entirely through a scalping program that existed here, and through other just straight up killing and death that existed here. And it's really terrible. And it's yeah, I think it's important to at a very at a baseline to just acknowledge and understand like what happened to the Indigenous populations in whatever region you are in. So I encourage all of you to take a moment to reflect on the cultures that have traditionally existed where you are today. And if you don't know what happened to them, what their story is, I'd really encourage you to try and find out, because I think that's the first step of any kind of meaningful reconciliation, is to really understand what took place. Housekeeping items. So we have a chat. I see there's 7 comments already. Amazing. Let's go to the chat here. We love interactivity. It's so much more fun when people actually engaging with us. So if you have a comment on what somebody's saying, or you just want to say hi, please go ahead and say something. If you have a question, we have a dedicated questions tab that is separate from the chat. So don't ask questions you want responses on in the chat. Go to the questions tab. If there's a question somebody else asked that you like, you can upvote it. And at the end, we will go through in order of most upvotes. I think that's it for me. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you 2 awesome people who are here with me today, Sam and Chris.
Hello, everyone.
So thank you guys for being here. I'm really stoked that you guys have chosen to come talk about this topic, which is pretty uncomfortable for some people. It's a big decision after all the time and energy and money that you guys have put into getting your license and operating for a few years in the first place. So I'm sure on some level it's there's some emotional hurt and not so great feelings inside, and I'm sure on other levels it's feeling good, because you wouldn't have made this decision if it wasn't the right decision for you. And I'm sure myself and everybody else here are really curious to understand more about that, but we'll get to that later on in this talk. For now, I'd really just like to have each of you introduce yourselves and kind of share a thing or two about who you are and what you think is relevant for our audience to know about you today. You want to go first, Sam?
Oh, I can go first. Hello, everyone. I am Samantha from originally Funny Duck Farms. Health Canada didn't like that, so we are were FDF Organic Cannabis. I've been an organic farmer since, I don't know, the early 2000s, growing cannabis since the mid-90s. Had some fun entanglements with the law in Health Canada way back in the olden times. And yeah, we were licensed for about 2 years, revoked the license recently. I'm super happy about it. It was definitely a right decision for us. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of explaining why for us it wasn't the right thing to do and why maybe it is the right thing for you to do or not.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. And Chris, what about yourself?
Thanks, Sammy. So yeah, my name is Christopher Henningsen. I co-founded Gladde and Real's Garden back in 2020, and we managed to get the license and the crop, and then we couldn't really sell it profitably. Our goal when we were starting a cannabis business, neither of us had a deep background in the legacy market, but we were both very interested in horticulture, and we thought, well, cannabis is this great cash crop that could fund research into really good horticultural techniques. And it turned out we overestimated the demand for bulk flower. So yeah, for that reason, it wasn't really a good direction for us to continue trying to go in. So we've revoked our license early this year.
Well, thank you guys both for being here. So this being the last episode of our current format with season 1, we'll stick to the format that we have had here, which I think, like we were chatting about earlier, will dovetail really nicely into kind of getting a better sense of your journey to getting revoked. So we'll start off with, what do you guys think? You know, clearly there's a lot that you take issue with this industry. Otherwise, you would not have revoked your license. But is there anything that you think is really positive that's come out in the past 3 years in this post-legalization world that we're in?
I feel like we are seeing some improvements. I think back to how it was in the 90s and how far we've come. So I'm really happy about that. But it is really hard to look at it and not see how much further we really need to go with educating kids, with removing stigma, with medical, but I don't want to focus on all the negatives. So thinking about the positives, we've come a long way. There's a lot less people going to jail for having cannabis. That's really good, I think. Do we have some improvements? Yes, absolutely. Would I love to see more recognition of this being an agricultural crop rather than a highly restricted substance? Yes. But I think everyone can agree that we've come a long ways from how it was. So I think that's really encouraging.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very well put. And I'd also add that being in the industry, I found that the barriers to entry for anyone who's determined and willing to work with Health Canada, they weren't actually as bad as I had kind of feared. And I am encouraged by the number of new people who are entering the industry and continuing to put their mark on it.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what kind of facility you want. Like if you're open to doing an outdoor farm, then that's really accessible as far as things goes. But I think it's once you're trying to do the indoor thing that then all the GPP requirements and the fact and the biggest thing to me is that you have to like have the building finished before you can even apply. While they have such terrible approaches to security clearance, to all the various things in place, it makes it really a huge barrier to have to like put that money up front without even knowing if you'll even be approved in any kind of way.
Yeah, that is definitely, there's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of need to adjust plans. So having things finished
I think
ahead of time. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think in our case, on our farm, we were really fortunate in that so many new entrants were buying land, they were building buildings or retrofitting. We already had the land, we already had the infrastructure. For us, it was mostly mental work that we had to do rather than physical work. So I feel like we kind of, it's not that it was an unfair advantage, but we had a lot of advantages that other applicants didn't have. So at the end of the day, when we did decide to revoke, I get almost everything back. I can't recoup my fees. I can't recoup like Health Canada fees and security clearances and testing, but I get all my garden beds back. I get my irrigation back. I get my greenhouse back. I get my garage back. So we had a lot of advantages where I think it would be, like Chris said, getting through with Health Canada, easy. They're generally not that hard to work with, possibly inconsistent, but it's very, very doable. But if you're starting from scratch, it has to be overwhelming. Like I can't imagine what it would have been like starting with nothing.
Yeah, and I think the getting your garage back, like it's a great point as far as why might someone want to revoke their license. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be used in a very specific way, which can be used in a much more many more degrees of freedom there once that license is gone.
Yep. And this is some other farmers I know that have micro licenses. The way that they put it is, it's just another agricultural crop. So, are you putting in corn this year? Are you putting in hemp? Are you putting in cannabis? Are you putting in peas? Like, it's just a crop. So to choose to not grow something this year because you think too many people are going to have it, it's not as complicated as it needs to be. But putting in a field of barley is not quite the same. It doesn't have the same regulatory compliance that a field of cannabis is going to require. So it is, a little different.
So Sam, you ran an outdoor organic cannabis farm, correct?
Yep.
Chris, what about you? I actually don't know what kind of facility you had.
We were also outdoor. We were in greenhouse, but it was classified as outdoor.
Okay.
And that's actually for those who are maybe just starting out, that is one of the biggest things I warn myself against. Going, if I could look back, I mean, everyone talks about the microbial loads, but also the fact that one has only one harvest, maybe two per year, versus being able to have a consistent crop coming in, it makes a huge difference really to how the business works. Yeah,
I mean, because there's every style of growing, whether it's pure outdoor with some kind of light depth so you can have 2 harvests a year, or something that's indoor, you'll have different total yields you can have, but you also have different costs. So it just becomes a cost benefit analysis for each thing. And for each type of person, even if you only get one outdoor crop a year, if your cost is an order of magnitude less than what it would be to do an indoor facility, then that becomes really attractive to certain people. Like for myself, with the capital that I have and the resources I have, like indoor is just not a possibility if I were to choose to get a license. And outdoor is the only thing that's remotely accessible to me. So that kind of limits what I can do. But it also means that I think there's just each facility needs to just do the math and have an actual business plan with numbers, and be really thorough about it, and take the business part really seriously, and make sure that all the assumptions they're making, because at the end of the day they are assumptions, are accurate, that they've verified it to the best of their abilities. People who are currently licensed, get lots of people to kind of look at their plan. Do these numbers make sense? Does this like selling point make sense? And then if the model does make sense to them, see, is this something I can actually like get off the ground, or am I going to be losing money for the first 2 years and I can't like get through that?
I think one thing that we looked at too is we grew obviously for years indoors because it was highly illegal, so you had to hide it. And once we had land and property, we could hide it outside. And for us, it's growing indoors is kind of fun, but we never enjoyed it on scale. And when I say we, I'm talking about me and my husband. We never really enjoyed the indoor growing, maybe in the winter when it's -30, but beyond that, we just didn't love it. Whereas we really liked the outdoor growing. So we had greenhouse, we had field, we had all the things. But again, like you're saying, a business plan. Is there enough demand for it? We were very fortunate in our case that we moved lots. But I know a lot of outdoor growers really struggle with that because it's not easy. And I think it would be very different. When we think about, what's going well, what's not, and what do we want to change? Imagine if we had farm gate. I know so many micros that if they had the ability to take their weed to farmers market or to offer it to their neighbors and friends, it all would have been sold. It wouldn't have been, because that's what we used to do. You used to go to the guy down the street and you sniffed your baggie and you got your weed. And now we're not there yet. We're going to get back to that, I think, eventually with the regulations and that. But for now, you better, as Sammy says, you got to have a really sound business plan that whatever it is you're producing is on the scale that it needs to be, and that there is some kind of profitability, and you have to enjoy it. So for us, we could have done it indoors, but then we would have hated it. And as it turned out, I hated the paperwork. So, it's like, well, guess what? I want to do this part. Well, I don't need a license to do this part. I can do it on a small scale just for ourselves. and I don't need to do all the paperwork. Because if I don't like it, we don't grow it. That's kind of how it works.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a nice segue into the things that aren't so good about the industry. What I'd appreciate maybe if each of you can think for a moment here, and maybe if we can like quickly just each do like a top 3 things that you think are really problematic that need to change without diving into it. Just like bam, 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 and there can be matching things. So if somebody goes first and somebody else feels the same thing, that's totally fine. And then once we kind of have that sense of like what you think is the most problematic, then we can kind of dive in and kind of get a sense of which is something we've never done before. I've never asked it in this form, but I just feel like that would be an interesting way to go about this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, picking up on the Farmgate thing, that's I think a huge thing, and not just Farmgate, because one of the things that we found really discouraging, and what led to the discussion to close our license, was when we were talking with people in New Brunswick, where they do have Farmgate, but because it's so difficult to get a processing license attached to that Farmgate, for smaller outdoor producers like ourselves, that wasn't really, it wouldn't even be helpful for the smallest producers to have Farmgate available if it isn't easier to get a processing license. And in looking into the processing license aspect, one of the big things that our impression at least was that there are no really clear pass-fail guidelines for when you can have who can be considered a QAP. If this was just a community college course that one of us could have taken for 6 months or whatever, and then known that we could, with that, meet the requirements to get a processing license, then Farmgate sales would have also been a huge benefit to us at that point. But it seems as though in order to get a manufacturing license, you need to have someone who can essentially fight a legal battle with Health Canada, or not necessarily that you have to fight a legal battle, but you have to be capable of it, because they won't, they didn't at least or give us any upfront guidelines onto what we would have had to do. And that, I think that in terms of what I would like to see changed in the regulatory environment, that's really the highest leverage point, just more upfront pass-fail guidelines around that.
And also audits too. Like they don't have any guidelines on what will get you a minor infraction, a major infraction, a critical infraction. Like they just don't.
Or what happens as a result of a minor versus a major infraction. I mean, that was...
I think we'll see more consistency as time goes on and there's more inspections, because right now, based on what I've seen from people across the country, different people are getting different observations for different things, and it's not consistent. And I think we might see in a year, maybe a year, but 2 or 3 for sure. I think we're going to see way more consistency with that. It's so new, as everyone likes to say, but it would be nice to see that. So then, yeah, people can go into it knowing I need to do this, I need to do that. And piggybacking what you said, Chris, think about all the things that we can grow on our farms that we can sell at the farm gate with not nearly the kind of regulatory burden that we have with this. It's a plant and it's safe. We've been saying this for decades. And it would be nice to see the government follow through and go, hey, you're right, this is safe. Let's make it accessible. Let's make it safe and accessible. It's not, it doesn't need to be that complicated. And yet here we are with a very complicated plant. So.
Yeah. I'm reminded of, I did an internship with Environment Canada, actually, when they were just phasing in biofuels. And very much, it's very interesting. I mean, one reason why I found the paperwork not so burdensome is I've been on the other end of it when I was doing this internship, and I saw what the federal bureaucracy looks like from the inside, and what it's like to be a person inside that machine, getting reports from the outside. And it definitely, when something is new like that, it's quite ad hoc. It's really quite surprising to someone who hasn't seen that firsthand. That these are human beings that get some very vague wordings from our elected representatives, and then that's made into very long but still open to interpretation wordings from their supervisors, and then everyone interprets them a little differently. It filters through. It can be very chaotic until things kind of find, I guess, those well-worn grooves. Once people see that things work a certain way, they do tend to find an equilibrium, but we're not there yet.
For sure. And then, Sami, you'd asked about like 3 things that we think are not going well. If I had to pick my top 3, security clearances, people should be able to get them first before they even apply. Like, it's just so simple. Medical tax. Why are medical people being charged excise tax? Drives me crazy and has for decades. And kids, Health Canada, all those regulations based on keeping the kids safe. They're not keeping kids safe. I have 3 kids that are, sorry, they're teenagers. And when I hear about what's going on at the schools, kids are using all sorts of illicit sources of like not safe supply drugs. And Health Canada is just doing nothing because they're so busy keeping all the regulated cannabis farmers from making sure they're filling out their forms, and it's really doing nothing to protect children or keep people safe. And that's a super pet peeve of mine because, yeah, there's a lot of kids out there using, vape pens that are leaking and blowing up and filled with crap. And it's really disturbing. And nothing's being, and I'm not suggesting that we crack down on the black market. Do not misunderstand that. But why don't we just regulate in a way that everybody can be doing this and it's safe? Like, I just don't think it's a big ask, but clearly it is because we're not there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when back before legalization was on the table, there was discussion of what it would look like, and everyone said, well, the vineyard model is great. Vineyards can sell to liquor stores,
yes,
but they can also sell on their own premise. And yeah, I'm pretty close to wine country in Nova Scotia. We go on vineyard tours. It works well enough there. And this is arguably a less dangerous substance.
Yeah, it's a substance
very hard to
does
overdose.
not cause people to either die directly from the substance or to kill accidentally because they're under the influence of the substance. Like how many tens of thousands of deaths are there every year in North America because of drunk driving? It's pretty it's a massive difference in terms of the social negative impact.
Right. And it would be amazing to see more ag tourism with hemp and cannabis. Like, why not? Like, why does it not exist? If we can do all of these things, why aren't we doing that? And I know it's coming. I know there's people working on things, and we're going to get there. Maybe I'm just impatient, getting impatient in my old age,
Chris,
what are your top 3 things if you had to pick 3 things that you think are most problematic?
One by a very large margin is the difficulty of getting a manufacturing license, particularly as a smaller player. I think in terms of impact versus effort that it would take on the legal side, that's probably it would blow my number 2 and 3 out of the water. I'd have to kind of think about the 2 and 3. Part of why my own attempt to enter the market failed was simply competition from people who were well-funded or knew more than me or both. And I don't think that's something that needs to change, really. I see that as a sign of a pretty healthy market, actually. In terms of, the paperwork, the regulatory burden, I would say, and maybe the uncertainty around the regulatory burden. We were talking earlier about major versus minor infractions and what happens in those. I mean, I realize that in some sense, the people enforcing these laws don't want to tip their hand because they don't know what the minimum consequence they have to put out there before people take these things seriously. I get that that's a part of the process, but it is also when you're putting together that business plan at the start. There's a recurring yearly fee which doesn't look too bad on the surface, but then there's also, well, do I need to be there in case an inspector shows up? Am I able to take a vacation? What do I have to have in place? Do I have all my paperwork in one place? How much time does it take me to do that organization? That's a lot harder to quantify than just the recurring fees, but it's a real cost. And yeah, it would be nice to see that cost diminish over time, as opposed to get larger over time.
Yeah, and for us, that was the big thing, is love growing weed. And to be fair, I don't like paperwork, but I can do it and I'm good at it. I just didn't want to. So for us, it really boiled down to the joy displeasure ratio wasn't good. Because, you know, I love raising cows and I love raising crops and all these things. And it's not always joyful, but there's enough joy, more than enough joy, to make up for the time that the calf kicks you or something goes wrong or equipment breaks. Whereas with the cannabis, it's like, wow, the burden of the paperwork, and this is where CertiCraft comes in with their handy software, right? But beyond that, there's still all these other things that it's just, for me, it literally sucked the joy out of it. It went from being an enjoyable pursuit, and to be fair, like, we used to raise shiitake mushrooms, and it didn't bring us joy, so we stopped. We looked into maple syrup, didn't like it. I love maple syrup, don't get me wrong, but it has to have all the components. I need profitability, I need enjoyment, and it needs to be feasible. And so for us, it's like, it had some of the components, but man, it's not my thing.
Sam, was there a moment in your journey with FDF Organic Farms, not Funny Duck Farms? Was there a moment where you kind of realized this is not for me, or it's not for us, like, or did it just kind of build up really slowly and you thought about it a lot? Like, how did it come to be for you?
You know, I think it was I think when it really hit for us was this harvest, because the goalposts are always moving. So the first year that we were licensed in 2020, our thought was, my husband, bless his heart, we're going to grow like 10 different varieties and have, you know, he's thinking farmer's market, he's thinking selection. And I went, sweetie, the paperwork, like, no, I will leave. I will literally just run away. And so, okay, so we pared it down to, I think, 3 varieties and some test varieties. So big paperwork burden, but at the end of the year, everyone's like, well, we need 50 kilo lots. And it's like, well, okay, I thought they were looking for boutique. And then the second year, we're like, you want big lots? All right, we're gonna grow 100 kilos. And we grew 100 kilos. We grew a lot. 2 people, harvested it by ourselves, it sucked. But as we're going through the harvest, we were also trying to get paid the second year. We were trying to get paid from the first year. So there was a lot of, never in any other industry have I run into as much money laundering and cheating and terrible stuff. There's some great people in the cannabis industry. Unfortunately, many of the people that we somehow had to brush up against, I did not like. So again, it was like, why are we working so hard to be involved with this type of industry
attitude?
Yeah. And again, I'm not painting the whole industry. I've been in it a long time. I think back to the olden times, there were great places to sell your illegal weed. There were really bad places to sell your illegal weed. We lucked out in that, yes, we sold it, but maybe not to an organization I'm okay with, but it was sort of too late. The transaction had taken place. So as we were kind of doing this harvest, it's like, this is a lot of work. This is a lot. So
is this the second 200 kilo? Sorry, the second 100 kilo one?
Yeah, first year was like, woo, we're growing weed, it's legal. Look at all of our weed. Like, it was super exciting. It was really great. And then yeah, we sold it. We had a 3-year contract. It was a good price. Like, it was really, really awesome. The processor that we were working with, again, like us, woo, cannabis. The big LP looking after it, not good. Goes back years of them taking advantage. Anyhow, I won't get into it because I don't want to say names, but it was really, really unpleasant. So then in the second year, it was clear that we weren't going to be dealing with those people again. And yes, we did have big lots. Again, still a big challenge, but there just wasn't it's not worth the money. It's really, I can't be bought, I guess. Maybe that's what it is. I can't be bought. I want to enjoy my life. Life is really short. We get one of them. I'm not going to spend my time. It's why I don't raise goats. I love goats. I don't want to raise them. They're terrible. Same with cannabis. I love growing cannabis. I love weed. I think it's fantastic. I don't want to sell it. I don't. So for us, it was pretty like, we don't want to do this as a business. There's so many other things we could be doing that would bring us way more joy. So
Sam, let's talk hypothetically here that 2-3 years from now, the landscape has shifted. And now there are legitimately straightforward channels to sell through
Yeah.
that are ethically in alignment with you, have good values, and the profit margins are higher than what existed in your time so far. And there's just none of this like, oh, I can't believe I have to sell to you.
Right.
Do you think there's a chance that you'd come back and get your license again if things shift in such a way that
Yeah, like if and it's not even so much a regulatory thing, because the regulations are very open-ended. They're open to interpretation, which is great. It means we're not being held to the same standard of an indoor running in downtown Toronto that's going to have radically different requirements than what we have. So yeah, if Farmgate didn't mean having to get liquor license, like there's a lot of complication. It depends on your province, but in Ontario, it's super complicated. It's expensive. And why? If I can sell all my produce at the farm gate, why can't I have a selection of weed? And yes, I'll put it in a lockbox so kids aren't taking it. Like, we're not going to be reckless about it, but if we did see those changes, it would be really easy to go back to it. And it's not as though that's it. I washed my hands from cannabis. I'm never doing this
it's just
again.
with the current regime and framework and the way it all works.
Yeah, we've got old MMAR licenses that were grandfathered in. We still grow for those people. Like we've always grown a lot of weed and we've always given it away. And we love that. That makes us really happy. And I'm sorry, it's not helping any of the businesses out there trying to sell weed if we're giving it away for free, but we like it. But you know what? I can sell beef and pork and chicken and hay, and there's loads of stuff I can make an income off of. I don't need to make it off of cannabis. If I could be doing farmgate sales, mail order, sure, I would go back to it. Didn't have that. What to me feels like an outrageous, maybe one of my kids wants to do the paperwork for a job. Great. You have a job, kid. Go do it. But as it is right now, no. If in the future, sure, why not? Absolutely.
So one last thing I'll add to kind of the earlier part of your story that you shared there, Sam, is that when we started building CertiCraft, we started designing what eventually would become CertiCraft in 2018. Worked with a few bigger LPs with their production teams who were all using Ample and hated it. And they gave us a whole bunch of their time to help us design what they wish they had. And that experience was awesome. Production teams are great. As we finalized these designs with them and started talking to kind of people higher up the bureaucracy chain and to other LPs that were on the bigger scale, we just kind of pretty quickly got the sense that this is not where we want to put our energies. Like some of the companies were great. Like, I'm thinking of Rubicon Organics, Whistler Medical. They were great. There's nothing kind of unethical, weird values there, but they are still bigger corporations that have bureaucratic ladders, and so you're talking to bureaucracy now instead of just a person making a decision. But the other companies we talked to, there's definitely feelings of you're really just trying to figure out how you can best take advantage of us. Fuck this, we don't want to do this. Let's focus on the craft industry. And that's when we shifted to being CertiCraft and just focusing on craft. And it was the best decision we've made, because every single one of our customers, we'd totally love to go share a joint, have a beer with them, and just be friends. Like, it's people that we actually want to get to know. And can't say that about the bigger LP space. I'm sure some bigger LPs are great. Like I don't know, like Tantalus Mind comes to mind, like Stewart Farms comes to mind. Like, those are great people, but they're definitely the anomalies. They are not the typical bigger farm or bigger producer. Chris, what about yourself? Was there like a moment for you guys where you guys were like, okay, this doesn't make sense anymore? Or was it like a slow kind of build up? How did that decision come about?
It was definitely it was one of those slowly at first then all at once kind of things. The sheer amount of labor that was required kind of surprised us. It's definitely, we were a bit naive, I think, in thinking, well, we've grown our personals. It's a fun plant to grow, and then growing a commercial quantity from there. Like, oh, this is actually different. This requires a lot more inputs than we had foreseen. So there was kind of a discouragement all through our first, like a growing sense of discouragement all through our first year of being operational. And then once we finally got our harvest and started to sell it and saw that side of the industry, it was like, okay, we can't actually pay ourselves doing this. And that was essentially it. It was when we were talking to buyers and seeing what what the investments we had made over the past year would actually net us, that we said, okay, yeah, we probably don't want to make these investments again next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And see, this is where and I think we were fortunate in our case that we need very few inputs. Like our farm is a very closed circuit, so almost every input we need is already on the farm. And it made the growing part easier. Scaling up was hard. Going from 30 plants to hundreds of plants, oh my goodness. And it's not the growing, it's the harvesting. The harvesting is always the bottleneck. But
You have such
in
a
our
tight
case,
window to do it all.
oh, it's very tight. So for us, really, the big issue was, and again, we were able to recoup everything. Other than licensing fees and testing fees, we get everything back, and it's totally usable on the farm for other things. But it's there's a lot of steps, and I think for a lot of people, like what Chris is saying, they can be very unexpected. That you can start into this and go, oh no, like what have we done? This is not, and it can work. We know that it can work, but it's not for everybody. It's definitely not for everybody. So, make sure you really want to do this before you do it, and don't spend a fortune. Like keep your costs low. So if you do decide it's not for you, you haven't sunk your life savings into it. You've maybe put a little bit in, but you can still recoup it in other ways on your land.
Yeah, and I think being associated with a working farm is probably a huge advantage that many craft growers have, which we sort of had, but more of a hobby farm in our case. And that makes the recouping a little harder also. So it's
for sure. Yeah.
Is there? We're approaching near the end of time here. We have like 5-10 minutes till we shift into the Q&A section. Is there anything that you guys want to bring up that you think is a good kind of area to focus on in our last little bit of time here together?
Did we do what was your questions? It was what's good, what's bad, what wants to change. Did we do all those?
What needs to change? I mean, we kind of did. I mean, because when you talk about what's bad, it kind of implies what needs to change.
More stuff needs to change.
Is there okay? Let me ask more an open-ended question here. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed so far that you think is problematic, or a specific solution to one of the things that we have talked about that you think should change? Oh, what is it, Sam?
Okay, so so this came up. Maybe it was last summer. I can't remember. Why isn't like CFIA or provincially OMAFRA?
Excuse me. Yes. Acronyms. CFIA.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Canadian Food Inspection Agency, that they look after most agricultural pursuits. So why like I get why CRA is there, they're the bean counters, that's fine. And I kind of get why Health Canada is there in regards to processing. But if you take a crop like corn or wheat or tomatoes, Health Canada is not overseeing that until you get to processing. Health Canada is not coming out and inspecting a grain bin or your greenhouse for your tomatoes. So what would happen if CFIA was looking after that? Or on a provincial level, OMAFRA, which is Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, I think is what it is. Each province probably has a different one. It would be really interesting.
Alberta does not have an agricultural association, but I know BC does. Ontario does. I bet most do. I don't know why Alberta doesn't. It's really weird.
But imagine if agricultural organizations were looking after cannabis more so than how it is. How different would it look? Maybe it'd be worse. I could be wrong. Like I never in a million years thought.
I don't think so. I think it'd be way better. Because they actually understand agriculture. I mean, the thing about Health Canada is that they come do and like we've been on some calls with some of our customers when they have an audit or an inspection, because they're just so frustrated sometimes, and it's like they're nervous and anxious and just feel more comfortable with us being there, and we're happy to kind of help in that kind of way. And just some of the questions they ask, it's like, you guys have zero understanding of how this plant works. Why are you doing an inspection of this? Like, we're trying to teach, and you're not listening to us. We're trying to teach you that no. And when you take a cutting, it comes from the plant. It's not coming from some magical source. It's like, no, but where did the cutting come from? No, we cut it from the plant. It's like you root it after that. No, but we came from somewhere. Where did it? It's like, how many times do we have to tell you? Like, it boggles my mind. And having an organization that actually understands agriculture actually understands the needs of farmers would make such a massive difference. And I can tell you that on our end here in BC, in the Kootenay specifically, with the Kootenay Cannabis Economic Development Council that I'm part of, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's a group of 20 organizations that include ancillary services like CertiCraft. It includes licensed producers, both processors and cultivators, and it includes local government in various regional districts and city councilors and things like that. I know we have one of the city councilors from Salmo is here today, and this call he's also part of the of this council. One thing that we're really pushing for is to get the cultivation part of the cannabis file out of Health Canada's hands, because that would make such a massive difference.
Yeah, and given that the end product comes out of someone with a processing license, the entire inspection process. If you're going to inspect it, I feel like you should inspect it as close to the end user as possible. So a lot of the regulations around the production of it don't make too much sense with me. Just to maybe to develop that thought a little further, what I'd like to see a bit more from Health Canada would be funding for research of the actual medical side of it, because that's something that, and if it weren't for the regulatory overhead, we would have probably kept the license and tried to partner with an agricultural or a medical group to do some of this research, because it's such a fascinating thing from a medical perspective, and the way that different terpenes have different effects, and how there's this very subtle way that it gets the body to produce its own effects. I would have loved to see Health Canada be more involved, and maybe also from supporting that research side and that aspect of it. And yeah, in terms of safety, number one, food inspection. Most of the things that Health Canada is guarding against, a food inspection agency would be doing. It's the same as any other plant that people put in their bodies. And then as for the let's say the knock-on effects of taking a psychoactive substance, and the medical changes that can happen there, that's not really it's not something addressed by making a pharmaceutical product. In fact, I mean, you can have very consistent doses, but if the setting that you're taking it in is different, then the effect can be radically different, because it's a psychedelic. It doesn't work the same way every time. And I feel like Health Canada maybe almost conflated this idea that, well, if it's pure, it can't have any unpredictable effects, and not really looking at, well, what are the medical implications of
and that really makes sense, because Health Canada's biggest focus is the pharmaceutical world of medicine and drugs.
Yeah,
and that's what they know, and they've modeled this whole cannabis regulations after what they know, which is the pharmaceutical world. So being people who don't have any background in agriculture, don't have any background in cannabis, have a lot of background in pharmaceuticals, and importantly have zero mandate to support business. That's not their mandate. They have zero mandate to support business and to allow companies to thrive. All of that results in a situation like what we have today, where it's pharmaceutical focus without any support for farmers.
Yeah, and the kind of safety. I mean, if you're making OxyContin in a lab, I get that you need to have very consistent batches. I get why Health Canada would have a certain attitude when saying, how do we control the production of this thing? But that's not really where I would say the need for care comes from when producing cannabis.
When I look in the comments there, Vincent, you've said it's a regulated substance, though it's literally growing medicine. I posit that food is medicine. Food is medicine for many, many people. And yes, I get it's regulated. And I think one of the things I had hoped for back in the 90s, when I was watching sort of legalization slowly take hold, wouldn't it be nice to see a medical stream and a recreational stream? And if you want some kind of high grade product that's lab tested and all the things, go ahead, buy your pharmaceutical cannabis. It's available. But if you want to just go buy some nice weed at the farmer's market, you should be able to go buy some nice weed at the farmer's market. You know, like if I'm buying tomato sauce, I know that it's in the store, it's been inspected by a health, like it's gone through steps. Whereas if I'm going to buy tomatoes at a farm stand, it's going to be a different thing. And I would just love to see it like, yes, it's medicine. Yes, we need to be careful with it, but it's not dangerous medicine. It's not dangerous medicine. And yeah, there is still this stigma about it. And even kids today are growing up with that stigma, and it's leading to problems. And it would just be really nice to see. Surely there's a way to make both sides happy, you know, to keep the kids safe and to keep the weed safe. Like, it, you know, humans are smart. Surely we can come up with some ways to have these dual streams.
Yeah, and on the topic of growing medicine, like I completely agree, but it's a very subtle medicine, and if Health Canada is so focused on microbial counts or percentages of THC, well, are you getting the right terpenes for the effect you actually need? Is Health Canada looking into that? Are people getting that advice? Because, of course, one of the things that has been mentioned in this community before is it's very difficult to do customer education when the rules around advertising are so stringent. So if someone needs a lot of linalool or whatever, how do they find that out? And how do you as a producer get that to them if you're
And to add to that as well, like, you know, you made a point like 5 minutes ago or so, Chris, about how testing should really happen as close as possible to the end user. And the testing today, to me, it doesn't actually matter in the way it's being done because the distribution sucks. You have all these provincial distribution boards that are literally holding on to product for 6 months, 8 months, 1 year before it makes it into a store in non-refrigerated, non-frozen context. So all the terpenes are breaking down, the cannabinoids are breaking down, microbial life is growing exponentially, and you end up with products that are completely different from the tests that were done 6 months ago. You know, we had guests, I don't know, like 10 episodes ago, maybe, a couple that do retail stores in and around Vancouver. And I think Dawn and Carol were their name. And Carol was talking about how she tests all of her product coming in, and most of it, I don't know about most of it, but like maybe like 30% plus, it was like a very significant percentage, fails her own microbial, because she can see like microbial life because she inspects everything with a microscope to see what's on them. And I'm willing to bet that all of that stuff was totally fine when it was tested, but it sat in a warehouse for 6 months in non-refrigerated conditions as a perishable good. So yeah, I think there's a lot to be said around like the fact that just the testing doesn't really make sense. And it speaks to Health Canada's lack of understanding this is an agricultural product and you don't treat it like a pharmaceutical product because it's not a pharmaceutical product.
Yeah, it's not shelf stable, exactly.
Right. And thinking about the comments about pesticides and allergens, yeah, that's the whole thing is we have very little testing that goes on with commercial crops. Our farm is certified organic, or was certified organic for decades. We're very, very careful. We don't use those pesticides. Conventional producers can use pesticides. There's very little testing of the food that's in the stores. And for allergens, yes, like I'm pretty sure labels have warnings and whatever, but even within the food industry, it's not being regulated maybe the way it should be. And I'm not calling for more regulations either. Like no, don't misunderstand, but it's so lopsided. And there has to be a little bit of trust in the producer. And consumers have to use, like, we can't just blindly buy things. And technically, isn't this what Health Canada is there for, is making sure products are safe? And that's why CFIA and all these other organizations are there. So again, I really feel like it's possible. We just haven't quite got there yet, but we are getting closer. So I guess that's good. You know?
When I look at where things were in the 90s and where they are now, it is definitely, like you said at the start of the stream, it's a very good trajectory.
Right. Yeah, I remember criminal record checks, like having to almost fight with the police to get a criminal record check to be allowed to grow medicine for someone who was sick or dying. And being, I don't want to say marginalized, but they treat you differently. Calling Health Canada, and they would act like you were a criminal. They would treat you like you were some kind of, it was really, really awful. And we had people that needed us to grow for them also having to call in and just being treated terribly. And it's like, they're sick. In some cases, they're dying. And Health Canada is like, well, you just want to get high. And it's so insulting. It's so incredibly insulting that people had to go through that. So yes, it's way better than it was. But yeah, I feel like we got some still more stuff to do,
And what you're talking about here, Sam, I think is a huge part of why the regulations suck so much. It's because that was their attitude. And the first year or two, like I remember when we started CertiCraft, the first year or two, any interaction we had with Health Canada or customers telling us about their attractions to Health Canada, it was all like they're just being treated as if they're criminals. And that was Health Canada's attitude. And it is shifting now, but the foundation was stigma of the regulations.
Absolutely.
And it really sucks that what that means is that now there's all these hardworking, honest, caring people who are being screwed over because of this.
And
for sure.
I think a lot of research that Health Canada could be doing into the benefits of this plant that isn't being done because of I think the same stigma and a lack of understanding about the mechanisms that it works on.
For sure.
All right, guys. Well, this feels like a good spot to maybe shift into the Q&A. You guys feeling all right with that, or?
Sure.
I'm good.
Awesome. So Matt asks a question. Matt Sparrow, were either of the guests CertiCraft users? If yes, how long did it take to become proficient with the software? I'll answer that. I'll say that no, neither Chris nor Sam used our system. Sam and I chatted.
CertiCraft?
Yeah.
I think CertiCraft, if you are not familiar with paper or record keeping as a farmer and organic certification, I was familiar with it. But if you're not, get CertiCraft. Anyone that I've talked to that uses it loves it. If you just don't have a head for that, like this is the software that you want to use. I've heard not great things from the other companies. I've heard lots of great things about CertiCraft. So if you feel overwhelmed by paperwork or that it's not your forte, talk to Sammy. He's going to help you out for sure.
Thanks, Sam. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I showed Sam a demo of CertiCraft 2 years ago, and she was like, "Oh, this is amazing. We're going to spend our first year just doing paperwork to keep our costs down, and then the second year we'll get your system." And then things just didn't pan out in the way that Sam expected to, as we went through earlier this call here today. All right, Deanna Huntsberger, I hope I pronounced your name correctly there, asks, any stats on the number of license revocation requests? And thank you both, Chris and Sam, for doing this today.
Sorry,
what was your question, Sam?
Oh, stats. Okay, sorry.
Statistics.
Got it.
No worries.
Yeah.
Deanna, every week on Friday when they announce who got their license, they also announce who has revoked their license. So I imagine it's probably part of the table that Health Canada has a table that shows all the licenses there. I think if you were to, hopefully it's easy to sort in a way where you can sort it by revoked. So that would probably be because that would be like the source itself of where any statistics would come from. I don't know if Statistics Canada has created a table around that. What I can say about Stats Canada, they employ a whole bunch of people to help the public create tables and statistics for themselves. Like I've gone on a call with Stats Canada before with questions about cannabis industry because I was trying to figure out how to navigate their website, and I was surprised to discover this person was like, "Hey, why don't I just create a table for you?" I was like, "Wait, what? You do that?" And I was like, "That's my job." And so that's also a possibility to just call into Stats Canada. I can't remember what department this would be or not, but I imagine just their helpline would help you navigate to the right place. So that's a possibility as well. I don't know if Sam or Chris, you guys have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've not looked into it, but I have seen revoked next to the license status thing. So I know that big table that has all the licenses in Canada, it would show that.
Okay.
If you can't sort it easily on the website, you can export it into an Excel document and sort it easily there. So.
Oh, that lets you export. I didn't know it let you export into a spreadsheet.
Pretty sure pretty sure I did that at one point.
I believe you. It makes sense. I mean, it's a very common feature. I just didn't realize that was there. All right. Dave Christie asks, if you can answer this, do you feel that acquiring a processing license would be as frustrating, time-consuming, and not fun as a cultivation license?
Worse. From everything that I saw, probably worse.
What about it, Chris? What do you think makes it worse than?
The cultivation license, the requirements are fairly straightforward, and it's in some of the infrastructure license. If you're, let me qualify that. If you're in a rural area with access to a lot of the infrastructure that you need already, like fencing, clean buildings, soil, then it's not really out of reach of the average citizen. However, getting the processing license, that requires a quality assurance person or professional, and Health Canada never really gave us a clear answer on who would or would not be qualified to act as a quality assurance person. So if you work as a quality assurance person in a different industry, then it would probably be easier.
But just to qualify that, they only accept, if I'm remembering correctly, people who have experience in the food and beverages industry, or there's one other industry. So it's really limits the number of QAPs that you can work with. Yeah. So that so the requirements are stringent for both, but there's a straightforward path to meeting the requirements for cultivation. For processing, it was never really straightforward when we looked into it, what would be required in order to pass that hurdle. Yes.
I think in our case, when we looked at it, it didn't seem to be a good use of our time. That it seemed to us to be more logical to find a processor to work with. So that way we could, we like cultivation, let's focus on cultivation. Doesn't mean we would have never gone for processing, but it seemed to be I could open an abattoir, but why? There's an abattoir 20 minutes from me. I can use them. So same thing with processing. I don't need to open a commercial kitchen. There's 20 minutes from me. So in our instance, it didn't make sense to go that route. And I think what Chris was saying is true, is it is a little more, it's not as straightforward as cultivation, because again, what are you processing? Everyone's method is going to be different. And that QA thing, that's a real sticking point for a lot of people. So again, I never went for the processing license. I can't directly answer that, but we looked at it and I just thought, I don't think it's going to be a good use of our time. And we didn't. And no, I don't think it would have been fun either, so, yeah.
Last answer we have here. So if you have any more questions, ask them now. Oh, last question we have here, rather. If anybody's got any questions, add them now, because if we finish answering this question, we have one surprise, some announcements about season 2, and then we're going to wrap it up. So last question for now is from Vincent Bedard of Green Culture Verte. Green Culture Verte. Once having revoked your license, what are the steps if you ever wanted to regain the license back? Full license application as if you were a new applicant? Or something different?
I'm pretty sure it's just a full application.
That's my understanding. Maybe you could reuse some of the...
It's timed perfectly to steal the floor from Sam. Oh, my phone's going off.
Sorry about that, folks. That alarm was not for the end of our session. But,
right.
But yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah.
You could obviously reuse all the paperwork you sent in the first time, so it would be a lot easier.
Be pretty fast, I think.
Because they know that you had your shit together and you were fine for 2 years. So there's way less risk if it's somebody who's using the same facility, same everything, same group. Yeah. And I imagine your security clearance still is in place.
It took us a long time to get ours. They would only give them to us in 2-year stints. Again, we have a history with Health Canada and taking them to court for a constitutional challenge. So maybe they just have a dislike for it. I don't know.
Your name came up in a not good way.
I've had an interesting life. That's all I'm going to say. So I don't have a criminal record. It doesn't mean I don't have something written down somewhere.
Good for you.
Yeah.
All right. So Sam and I wanted to share a little something with you guys. And here you go.
Just what you can get if you sign up with CertiCraft.
I told you you'd laugh, Chris.
Oh my goodness, I was not expecting that.
Probably weren't expecting the Spanish Inquisition either.
Nobody expects it.
All right, so let's talk about season 2. Season 1 has really focused on kind of those three questions that we always ask at the start. What's going well, what's not going well, and what needs to change to make things better. We feel, and we've had some feedback, that there's only so much to kind of explore in this world, and maybe in like a year or two we'll kind of come back to these questions when there's been enough shift that it's not kind of, after 24 episodes, the same conversation repeating in different flavors and forms. So for season 2, we're going to be focusing on highlighting cool stories in the industry, and just finding guests that we think are up to really cool, neat things, and giving them an opportunity to talk about their passion, what they're doing, and what they're hoping to achieve, and maybe on some level trying to be more positive in the world of cannabis, because a lot of these episodes have really focused on like, oh my god, there's so much bullshit that we're dealing with, what the fuck, and that's real, but it would be nice to kind of be a place where people can be inspired as well, instead of it kind of being this dreary like holy fuck, Health Canada, CRA, various provincial governments, local governments, why do you guys make this so hard, all this stigma driven bullshit we're dealing with.
Bullshit is such a resource in agriculture too.
Unfortunately, not this type of bullshit.
Wrong bullshit.
So our first episode of season 2, we're actually going to have one of our guests from our first episode of season 1 back. We're going to have Kylie Beaudry from Parkland Flowers. She has some really exciting news that she reached out to us about and that she wanted to share. And I won't say what it is here because I don't know if it's public news or if it's private. She did tell me what it is. And it'll be nice to kind of kick off with one of the guests from the first seasons, from the first episode that we had, to kind of give us an update a year later on what has changed. Sam, Chris, it was a real pleasure to have you both here today. Thank you guys for being willing to kind of share a whole bunch about your journey and what you guys went through. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, we'd really appreciate it if you liked and followed our page here, and if you subscribed, especially if you were really into this. Chris, Sam, any last words from you guys?
Just going to say thanks for having me. If there's people that have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer questions people have about getting in or getting out. Because there's so many little nuances to why you should or shouldn't grow or not grow,
Sam, do you maybe want to drop your contact info in the chat then, if you're down to?
I'll figure that out.
And I'll just note to everybody that once this ends, the chat remains, and actually within 20 seconds or so, this thing we just recorded replays automatically. So just stick around for the chat if you want to see what Sam has to say. Sorry, I did cut you off there. Was there anything else you wanted to share, Sam?
No, that's it. That's good. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Chris, anything else from your end?
Similar for me. If anyone has questions, has specific questions about our journey, wants to learn from our mistakes instead of making them themselves, definitely happy to talk with people who are still in the industry. I do have an optimistic feeling about it.
Well, I appreciate the two of you guys being so open and being down to share your time with people who are curious to learn more. And given that this is the last episode of season 2, I'm going to end in a very special way. Bye.